Bitter and hateful rivalries have been formed ever since some random and fateful day in the early 1990s when water-based finishes were introduced to the wood flooring community. To this day, street fights, brawls, and violent riots break out at the National Wood Flooring Convention over this one question: is oil-based or water-based finish better? Well, I'm mostly joking, but let's lay out some criteria for what would define one as better than the other. Color, toxicity, smell, dry times, and resistance to damage. Let's start with color. The color of your finish is really important, and I truly hope you haven't learned this the hard way. The main color difference between water and oil is that out of the can, oil-based finish has a golden hue to it, and it continues to golden over time, where water-based comes out clear, and for the most part, it stays clear for the duration of its life. If you want to stain your floors a brown or any other type of classic color, both finishes will be solid for you. Oil-based gives a richer, enhanced look. That's a great thing, unless you want a modern look. If you use oil-based finishes on a modern floor, it's going to ruin the look. The golden hue of the finish is going to clash with the modern tones. In the beginning, it might not be too bad, but over time, it's going to continue to golden and it's going to get worse. A not so nice word for the goldening effect it has is yellow. It yellows over time. If you want a modern look, you've got to stick with a water-based finish. If you're going with a classic look, you can pick either one. They're both great. In recent years, it's become more and more apparent that the materials that we surround ourselves with have major effects over our health. That's why we see so many warning labels today that let us know that something is linked to cancer or reproductive harm. You've seen the labels. Now, you might be thinking the only time this affects you is when the product is drying, and for the most part, you would be right. But research shows that these products continue to off-gas for years to come in your house. Now, it's not a lot, but it's a little. That means whatever finishes you use in your house might have longer-term health effects than you realize. So we need to look at VOCs per gallon to determine how toxic a substance is. VOC stands for volatile organic compound. And essentially, it means things that are bad for you. They're linked to cancer, they're linked to that reproductive harm, bad stuff. They're generally measured in grams per gallon. For example, an oil-based finish usually has around 500 VOCs per gallon. I am not a scientist, but to give you some perspective, that's a lot. If you were to breathe in the fumes of this product while it's drying, it's going to have mild mind-altering effects. So it's pretty strong, aka it's going to get you kind of high. Respirator, definitely recommended. Water-based finish is usually going to have between 100 and 200 VOCs per gallon. That's still not great, but it's definitely better than oil-based. You probably won't get high breathing the fumes while applicating water-based finish. Still recommend that respirator though. You could definitely wind up with a nasty headache. If you're really worried about the toxicity of the finish you're using on your floor, I would recommend you go with one of our favorite water-based products. It's called Green Star, and it's from a German finish company called Berger Seidel. And I'll drop a link to it down below. It's a surprisingly affordable commercial-grade water-based finish, and it's rated as so safe that it can be used to coat children's toys. This is one of our go-to finishes both for the health of our employees and the health of our customers. If you're dead set on oil-based, this same company makes a oil-based product that's not nearly as healthy as Green Star, but it definitely beats the heck out of the industry standard for oil-based products. One of the most common finishes you may have read about online is Bonatraffic HD. And to give you some perspective, even with its Green Guard label, it still has 125 VOCs per gallon. That's a pretty good amount. If toxicity is a really big deal to you, I would recommend doing a lot more research than just the little bit I'm telling you here. Anywhere that the finishes are for sale online, if you look in the specifications section, you're going to find these PDFs called material safety data sheets, and they're going to give you everything you could possibly know about the dangers within these finishes. Now, warning, You practically have to be a scientist to understand what these sheets mean. Smell. Now don't get me wrong here, none of these products smell great. But something for you to keep in mind is that the guys who apply these products all the time, a lot of them don't wear respirators, and their bodies get used to the smell and they can't smell it the same. It's not nearly as strong to them as it's going to be to you. So take their word with a grain of salt. I can tell you without a doubt though, the oil-based smells considerably worse and the smell lingers in the house much longer than with the water-based finish. So for smell, water-based definitely wins here. Dry times. Even if you're not living in this house, maybe it's a vacation home, you still want to consider the dry time for one very important reason. When we finish wood floors, the airflow within your house is relatively uncontrolled. That means there's always little particles floating through it. And because of that, the longer the dry time is, the more little junk that winds up in the finish. Water-based has between a 1 to 2 hour dry time generally, whereas oil-based can be 10 to 12 hours. So you can see that long open window allows for a lot more stuff to float through the air and get stuck in your oil-based finish. Now don't sweat this too much, it's not that big of a deal. That stuff that lands right on top will come out pretty quickly just from being walked on. But you do want to keep that in mind. The other thing is, you can stay in your house a lot of times depending on the layout of the wood when you're using a water base. But if you're using oil, those fumes are really strong and you don't want to be in there stirring up dust. You probably just need to vacate the premises. And for most people, resistance to damage is going to be the biggest deciding factor. There are really 3 types of damage that ruin your wood floors. 1 is liquid, 2 is scratches, and 3 is just general wear through. Liquids are pretty straightforward. Excessive liquid causes your floor to cup, and if it doesn't get dried up soon enough, finish will start flaking and peeling. This ruins a floor faster than just about anything. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter which one you use. They're both going to fail if you let them get too wet too often and you don't clean it up. Now, scratching on the other hand happens mostly from dogs or things being drug across your floor, whether that's furniture or a little rock stuck on the bottom of your shoe. Now, you may not like what I'm about to say, but there is no finish out there that is strong enough to resist a 100-pound dog running across your floor and its nails or a rock stuck to the bottom of your shoe. The amount of force generated by those items is going to scratch any finish. So hardness of finish is actually the wrong thing to be looking at. Some of the hardest finishes out there wear the worst. Maybe they protect the wood underneath, but they get this nasty gray color to them and all the scratches are really prominent. You actually want something that's a little bit softer. And this is where oil-based finish really shines. When oil-based finish gets scratched, it has almost a self-healing effect. The scratch is still there, but you cannot see it to the same degree that you can see it with the water-based finish. For scratch damage, oil-based is the massive winner here. Wear through happens mostly because of thickness of finish. As long as you're using quality products applied properly, it's going to come down more to finish thickness rather than oil versus water base. However, oil-based finishes usually have a higher build to them. That means that 3 coats of oil base is probably going to be thicker than 3 coats of water base. So it still gets a slight edge. Also, consider paying for an additional coat to be put on when you have your floors refinished. And you also need to take the maintenance coat very seriously. That needs to happen every 1 to 3 years, because if you allow your floor to wear through in any areas, it's too late for a buff and coat and it's just going to need to be refinished. In general, we recommend that people who want a classic looking floor go with oil base, and people who want a modern looking floor to go with water base. Expect to pay extra for the water base though. A quality water based finish costs anywhere from 2 to 3 times what a quality oil based finish costs. And that's just because of the raw materials that go into them. But I've given you the facts so you can make your own informed decision. I'd be curious to know what you're going to use on your floor down in the comments and why. And if you like this video, I want to thank you for watching, and I have another good one for you right up here.